I had to give tough love to my partner, Ariel. Every now and then, I have to really sit him down and explain the business to him because Ariel came at me with a statement, right? Each day that goes by is each day that John Jones's position looks weaker and weaker. And I was having this discussion with Ariel, and Ariel said, Chael, what are you talking about? Jones versus Francis is an absolutely massive fight. I said, Ariel, the biggest fight of 2021 is going to be Covington versus Usman. That is the biggest fight we'll see in 2021. And Ariel said, are you kidding me? Jones versus Francis is way more massive. Stop, Ariel, stop. Stop. How? How are you getting to that point? Because if you're talking about a level of anticipation, sure. If you're talking about pure size and what they weigh, sure. But you cannot have, and I will quote, a way more massive fight. You can't have that unless you're talking about moving numbers. Do you guys ever just use yourself as an example? There's fights that you'd rather see compared to other ones. There's some fights that are just, you would rather see them, but you're going to watch them all anyway. You might be more excited on a specific day, but you're going to watch them all, right? And so once a fight crosses that threshold that everybody who cares about fighting is interested and will watch the fight, once it crosses that threshold, you're splitting hairs at some point. John Jones and Francis, by example, would sell out an arena for sure. Any arena the UFC plays at any ticket price that the UFC sets. Covington versus Usman will do the same thing. So what is the difference if you tell me one is much more massive? How? There's only so many seats at a set price, and they're all going to be gone. You see the problem? Because that carries over to pay-per-view. That carries over to ratings. That carries over to merchandising. That carries over to every single piece of the business. I'm just using one microcosm, but I'm proving the same point. It cannot be massive in comparison to. You might be a lot more excited for it. Does that bring in anybody else? If the people that it does bring in have a higher level of energy and excitement for it, and that's what you're attempting to call massive, you're missing the point. And the business structure is very fair and straightforward, which is to take in consideration, even after the fact, if things go incredibly well. That's what the points represent, if it goes very well. What the promoter knows but doesn't want to come tell anybody because he's a promoter, he's not a demoter, is there's a tipping point and it doesn't really change. I could sit here and argue for any argument you wanted to tell me about Jones versus Ngannou, which is a massive fight, but you're acting as though it's more massive. The biggest fight of 2021 will be Covington and Usman. It was the single greatest welterweight fight of all time, not to mention there was tensions, not to mention it was personal. These guys were even banned from the Palms Casino for getting into it. I mean, these two are oil and water. They just simply can't be around each other. And Colby is the only guy that's got the imagination of the world that he could actually beat Usman. I mean, for many reasons, I don't need to explain to you why that's a massive fight. I'm just explaining to you that the purses and the demands of these two competitors, they're begging to fight one another. And guess what? Now they get to. They're going to have their own venue and a marquee spot and great big checks that come along with it, but that's not what this is about. That is a byproduct. And if you try to do any of that out of order, you get none of it. And that's what John tried to do. But trying to argue that it's a massive fight as though Dana White is going to have to acquiesce, change absolutely everything, and give in for one night of business, I'm just here to remind you, they're the same thing. How much money do you want? Arena's only got so many tickets, and yes, I realize you can manipulate the price, but whatever a high and reasonable price is what they will charge for Usman versus Colby, and they will sell them all. There's certain thresholds in pay-per-view where if you can hit, good enough. They will hit that threshold, as will the ratings that leads into all of the pre-shows and everything else and every extensions of this contest, and that's just one example. What's Adesanya going to do next? That's going to be a big deal. What kind of a driver is the Ultimate Fighter going to prove to be when it comes back? It's always been a hell of a vehicle, but just how successful of a driver is it going to be? Because that's going to put a lot of eyeballs on Ortega and Volkanovski. I mean, one that you weren't even expecting. Thug Rose just made 115 pounds interesting again. Ngannou versus Derek Lewis will sell out any arena and meet any threshold just because of Ngannou. Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier. I mean, right, I can keep playing this game that has ever been as big of a fight, and you want to come out and tell me, oh, that fight is massive. But there's a tipping point. It doesn't matter if it's massive or it's big or it's large or it's heavy. At some point, it's doing all the same number. And a lot of people that are close to this sport will talk about what they really want to see more. And sure, there's a passion. You felt it Saturday night. There was 3 title fights. They were all good ones. Fair statement? But you meaningfully wanted to see Usman and Masvidal more. Fair statement? That doesn't mean you were going to miss Rose, and it didn't mean you were going to miss the bullet. You weren't going to miss Weili, and you weren't going to miss Andrade. So if you're already there and they've already got you just because you really want to see this, what making it massive, do you see where it's the same thing? It doesn't change. So if you have one guy coming to the table who is so unconfident in the draw of the fight that he needs a guarantee up front, look, that's going to be a red flag. If I'm a promoter, and I'm Chael Sonnen, if I'm the promoter, I will work something out with you that's very fair. I will keep everything else. I don't know where this whole give points away, I don't know where this came from or how this came over to our sport in the very first place, except for when you're doing that to incentivize. What you're attempting to incentivize is your principal participants, your main event fighters, to go out and do media, their own social media, educating people of who, what, when, why, or where, but then also doing the built-in media that your PR team will set up. Getting on an airplane, going somewhere that you don't want to do. Sleeping in hotels, going to the radio shows, going and doing the local talk shows. You're incentivizing them to do that. I will incentivize you based on how this does. We know the recipe, which is directly related to how much media the stars are willing to do. That's the formula that you put in the equation that kicks out your projected number at the end of the night. So if you have something, you got to understand that, though, because if you have one guy saying, I don't want the back end, I need it guaranteed up front, you're going to be sitting there going, wait a second. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know exactly what it takes to make a big fight. It's going to take a commitment by you to go and do a tour of media. You're not interested in that back end money. That kind of tells me you're not going to do the media. I mean, do you guys understand where this becomes very problematic? Because you don't know what that means. If you're partnering up with a guy, but he comes in with this weird language to you, it's your job to decipher, what is he really saying to me? He's clearly saying to me he doesn't think that this is going to do as well as we would like it to do. And he's also telling me there's a reason why. Does it mean he doesn't plan to work very hard ahead of time? Does it mean he doesn't plan to make this interesting, spread the word, and do some of the PR? I don't know the answer to that, but nobody would. It's your job to attempt to decipher, and you got a guy who's coming in and telling you he's not sure about the back end. So he wants loaded up front. You see the problem? It doesn't work that way. It can't work that way. And in addition to that, there is no massive fight. Look, there's $30 million guys out there. John Jones isn't one of them. John is not going to have the biggest fight of the year. Colby and Usman will take that. Colby and Usman are given an opportunity to take that because Adesanya experiment at 205 didn't work. Had that worked, then whatever Adesanya was going to do next at 205 would have likely been the biggest fight of the year. But this is how these things happen. These things happen very organically. Thug Rose just fought. She was not the main event. Mark my words, Thug Rose's next fight, she's going to be the main event. She just made an entire division interesting again. Cody Garbrandt is one win away from making things real interesting again, particularly if TJ Dillashaw gets over on Sandhagen. And I'm just sharing with you, there's ways to do this. There's ways to change. You never need to change your business for one guy, particularly if that guy is supposed to be your partner. You got to listen to him. Whenever somebody tells you who they are, listen. And if I'm the promoter and I'm giving points away on the back end with one built-in expectation. But you're telling me that you're not interested. You're not sure it's going to do well. Well, why? What is it you know that I don't? Unless it's that you're not going to follow the formula. And if you secretly know that, and we both understand I can't make you, then sure you'd rather have it loaded up front. Sure you would. Stick me on a guarantee, not look out for everybody else on the back end. That's what you'd have to be wondering is happening. And by the way, what fight is worth that? Why would you ever want to do that? Usman is creeping up, man, on absolute star. This guy's already a star. He's creeping up on. Usman's going to be big. Stephen A. Smith believes that Francis is going to change the business that he is so big. Stephen A.'s pretty damn good at what he does. That's a very interesting projection. I don't disagree with him. And those guys aren't $30 million guys. See where this becomes a problem?